Hi, I'm Leslie Madsen, Associate Director in the Center for Teaching and Learning at Boise State University, and today I'm going to share with you 8 tips on using OER inclusively. When I'm talking about OER, I'm referring to open educational resources, which largely are openly licensed digital content that is available at no cost to students beyond the expense of the technology necessary to access that content. It includes a wide range of media, and it's usually customizable. Throughout this presentation, if I mention a concept like OER or Universal Design for Learning or anything else, and you're unfamiliar with those concepts or want to learn more, please refer to the resources list that accompanies this presentation. So why am I talking about using OER inclusively? Well, when creators make instructional materials and license them openly, they do so in the hopes that that material would be useful to the greatest possible number of students. So they write for a broad general audience. Your students, however, are particular people from a particular community. And so you can revise that material with your students in mind so that you're making connections to the students' communities so that students can see the relevance of this material to their lives and how those topics affect their communities. Let's talk about how you can use OER inclusively. First of all, you can look at the authors, right? Who contributed to the content? Who created it? Are they citing diverse sources? Are they people at teaching-focused universities who work with students a lot? Or are they instructors who are primarily researchers at fancy research universities? You might want to lean more toward the author or the creator who spends more time with students. You're going to want to update the language and terminology in your books. So for example, I was looking at a US history textbook and I realized that the textbook was using outdated terms to refer to the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. So I updated it because that was what the license allowed me to do. It's also a good idea to use pronouns inclusively. So include a range of pronouns because your students use a range of pronouns and their friends and family members use a range of pronouns. So use the singular they, use he, use she. Have a range available so that students see themselves and their communities reflected in the content. You're going to want to include voices from communities affected by whatever topic you are discussing. And remember that representation doesn't necessarily mean thoughtful inclusion. So you want to be sure that you are not just adding stock photos of diverse people, of diverse models, rather than meaningfully integrating the voices of and perspectives of the people from affected communities. As much as possible, look for the standpoints of affected communities and stakeholders. And what a standpoint is, it's different from a perspective. It's a communal shared perspective earned through shared struggle. No community is monolithic or entirely homogeneous, but when you're representing a community, you want to be sure that you're including voices that speak for that community or representative of that community. That doesn't mean that you can't include outlying voices and outlying perspectives of individuals from that community, but you should call them out as such. If there are case studies, examples, or scenarios, modify those or start with examples from your students' lives so that they can see the content is directly relevant to their lives and applies in their lives and communities. But then also include scenarios and case studies that challenge your students and that introduce them to other people's experiences. So for example, if you're talking about income inequality or wealth inequality, you might talk about what it looks like in the region where your school is located, and then other regions, and talk about why there's a difference. Use images thoughtfully. So for example, for many years, textbooks and other discussions of overpopulation would only illustrate that discussion with pictures of crowds of brown and black people in the developing world, and would imply that the blame lay entirely on those people for example, not using birth control, for exceeding their available resources. And the captions and the images didn't include any reference to corporate or colonial forces that extracted the resources from that region and made those people resource poor. Another example is using stock photo images of models in wheelchairs that your actual wheelchair user would not be using in their everyday lives, right? That's a hospital transport wheelchair that someone else pushes. So just be sure you're being thoughtful. In the resource list, you'll find places where you can find images made by creators in diverse communities. Be sure your OER content, whether you're adopting it, revising it, or creating it from scratch, meets basic accessibility guidelines so that the widest possible range of users benefits from your materials and can learn from them, and apply the principles of universal design for learning. We'll talk more about that in a moment. I encourage you to incorporate multimedia into your OER. There is OER video, audio, images, all kinds of other media. And when you do that, think about the creators of those resources as well. Link out to those materials if they aren't openly licensed, or embed them. But find, for example, creators and experts who are from other parts of the world, who don't look like your students, who have accents that may be unfamiliar to your students, so that your students understand that anyone can be an expert and they don't stereotype narrowly who qualifies as an expert. It also helps students who are not in the majority or dominant culture in your area to see the people who might look more like them in expert roles. Finally, you're going to want to give students many ways to engage with the content in your course. So you could offer the same general content as a podcast, a video, and a text. You might allow students to choose different pathways through the material if that's possible in your course. I understand it's not possible in all courses. And then finally, you can also ask students to create OER. Give them assignments where they're creating material that demonstrates their achievement of course learning outcomes that you then ask them to license openly so that future students can use it and build on it. And you can use that in your future courses. Again, check out the resource list. That's where all of the good stuff is related to this presentation, where you can take a deeper dive. Thank you for doing this work. It's important. You're building a more inclusive and equitable learning experience for your students and for all students. Thank you so much.